The emergency meeting room in Seoul was cold enough that President Soo-min Lee could see her breath when she spoke. Outside the reinforced windows, snow was falling on the city even though it was supposed to be spring. The weather had been strange all year, but nobody was complaining. Strange weather was the least of humanity's problems right now. Soo-min sat at the head of a metal table that looked like it belonged in a military bunker rather than a government building. Around the table sat the four most important people in Earth's defense network. Fleet Admiral Tae-ho Kim was a big man with scars on his hands from his early days working on ship engines. General Yoona Choi was small and quiet, but her eyes missed nothing. Dr. Ji-won Nam looked like she hadn't slept in weeks, which was probably true. And across from the president sat Ambassador Min-ho Park, who had arrived from the council station just 6 hours ago. "Show them the recording," Soo-min said. Min-ho activated a small device, and suddenly the room was filled with the sound and image of the Galactic Council chamber. The aliens looked even more ridiculous on the big screen than they did in person. President Lee watched the crystal being make its threats while the other creatures hissed and buzzed their agreement. When the recording ended, the room was quiet except for the hum of the building's heating system. 500 ships, Admiral Kim said finally. 12 species. That's more than we've ever faced at once. It's more than anyone has ever faced at once, General Choi added. The Council has never sent a force this large against a single species before. Dr. Nam was staring at her tablet, scrolling through columns of numbers. The energy requirements alone would be massive. They're not just trying to scare us. They mean to completely destroy our ability to resist. President Lee leaned back in her chair. "Good," she said. The others looked at her in surprise, except for Min-ho, who was smiling slightly. "Ma'am?" Admiral Kim asked. "I said good," Soo-min repeated. "For 5 years we've been preparing for this day. For 5 years we've been building, planning, and getting ready for the moment when the galaxy decided humanity was too dangerous to exist." She stood up and walked to the window, looking out at the falling snow. "Honestly, I was starting to think they were smarter than we gave them credit for." Dr. Nam cleared her throat. "Ma'am, with respect, 500 ships is exactly what we hoped for," the president interrupted. "Ji-won, tell them about the temperature readings." Dr. Nam's expression changed to something like excitement mixed with fear. She pulled up a new set of data on the main screen. "We've been monitoring Council space for 3 years now. Every ship, every station, every colony world. They all have one thing in common. They're all hot," General Choi said. It wasn't a question. Not just hot. Tropical. The coldest environment any Council species considers habitable is about 25 degrees Celsius. Most prefer it even warmer than that. Dr. Nam highlighted several star systems on the display. "Look at their ship designs. No insulation, no cold weather capabilities. Their weapon systems are built for energy efficiency in warm environments." Admiral Kim was beginning to smile. "And if those systems get cold?" "They stop working," Dr. Bo Nam said simply. "We tested it. Remember that Council scout ship that had the accident near Pluto last year?" Everyone nodded. The official report said the alien ship had suffered a mechanical failure and been rescued by human vessels. What it didn't say was that the failure had been caused by human scientists using a modified mining laser to flash freeze one section of the ship's hull. "The entire ship shut down in under 10 minutes, Dr. Nam continued. "Life support, weapons, engines, everything. The aliens inside went into some kind of hibernation state. They couldn't even stay conscious in temperatures that humans consider mildly chilly." "Which brings us to winter protocol," President Lee said, returning to her seat. General Choi activated another display, this one showing the outer colonies. "For the past 2 years, every human settlement has been installing what we call climate management systems. The aliens think they're for terraforming." "They're not?" Min-ho asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. "Oh, they are," Admiral Kim said with a grin. "They're for terraforming alien-controlled space into something more human-friendly." The display showed massive industrial complexes on dozens of worlds. From space, they looked like ordinary cities or mining operations, but the technical specifications told a different story. Each complex contained cooling systems powerful enough to change the temperature of local space by hundreds of degrees. The beauty of it, Dr. Nam explained, is that the aliens helped us build them. They've been so eager to trade with us, to share technology, to help us develop properly. Every time they gave us better power sources or improved manufacturing techniques, we used them to build bigger and better cooling systems. President Lee pulled up a galactic map. Red dots showed the locations of human colonies and blue lines connected them in a complex network. When Winter Protocol activates, she said, every human colony becomes a node in the largest refrigeration system ever built. We can drop the temperature in any region of space to whatever level we choose. How cold? Minho asked. Cold enough, General Choi answered. Cold enough to freeze their weapons. Cold enough to shut down their ships. Cold enough to send every alien in that Council fleet into hibernation before they even know what's happening. Admiral Kim activated one more display, showing the human fleet. The ships looked different from the sleek, elegant vessels the aliens used. Human ships were bulky, heavily armored, and covered with what looked like unnecessary equipment. While the aliens were building ships for speed and efficiency, the Admiral explained, we were building ships for survival. Every human vessel can operate in temperatures down to minus 200 degrees Celsius. Our crews have suits that can keep them warm in the vacuum of space. Our weapons are designed to work better when they're cold, not worse. It's like the difference between a race car and a tank, Dr. Nam added. Their ships are faster and prettier. Ours are built to keep fighting when everything else has frozen solid. Minho was quiet for a long moment, studying the displays. You've been planning this since first contact, he finally said. Since before first contact, President Lee corrected. The moment our deep space telescopes detected their first scout ship, we knew this day would come. A species that could travel between stars wouldn't stay friendly with newcomers for long. History taught us that much. So what's the plan? Minho asked. General Choi stood up and walked to the tactical display. Phase 1. When their fleet arrives, our colonies will appear to panic. Civilian evacuations, desperate calls for help, all the things the aliens expect to see from a defeated enemy. Phase 2, Admiral Kim continued, our evacuation fleets will engage their forward units. We'll take losses, fall back, make it look like we're barely surviving. Phase 3, Dr. Nam said, her voice getting excited again. Once their entire fleet is committed to the attack, every cooling system in human space activates simultaneously. We turn a volume of space larger than most solar systems into a deep freeze. Phase 4, President Lee finished. We show the galaxy what happens when you threaten a species that evolved during ice ages. The room fell silent again. Outside, the snow was falling harder now, covering Seoul in a blanket of white that made the city look clean and peaceful. There's one more thing, General Choi said quietly. Intelligence reports suggest the Council isn't planning to stop with our military. They want to occupy Earth, re-educate our population, turn us into a client species. President Lee's expression went very cold. Then they've made their choice. She stood up and walked to a wall panel which opened when it recognized her handprint. Inside was a single red switch with a clear cover. Winter Protocol has 3 settings, she explained. Defensive, which disables enemy forces but leaves them alive. Aggressive, which destroys military targets while protecting civilian populations. And she paused, her hand hovering over the switch. Total. Ma'am, Admiral Kim said carefully. The projections for total setting? I know what the projections say, President Lee interrupted. Every ship in their fleet destroyed. Every alien, crew frozen solid. And every world that sent ships against us experiencing a climate crisis that could last for decades. She looked around the room, meeting each person's eyes in turn. They want to see what monsters humans can be? Let's show them what winter looks like. She flipped the switch. Warning lights began flashing throughout the building and a quiet alarm started sounding. Winter Protocol is now authorized, she announced. All department heads, prepare for immediate implementation. Admiral Kim, I want our fleets in position within 72 hours. General Choi, begin evacuation simulations on all outer colonies. Dr. Nam, run final tests on all cooling systems. And Ambassador Park, she added, turning to Minho. I want you back on that council station. When this is over, someone's going to need to negotiate the surrender. It might as well be you. Minho nodded and stood up. What should I tell them when they ask about our response to their ultimatum? President Lee smiled, and for the first time since the meeting began, she looked genuinely happy. Tell them we said no. 3 weeks after the ultimatum, the alien fleet arrived at the edge of human space like a swarm of angry wasps. 500 ships from 12 different worlds, all gleaming metal and flowing curves that caught the light from distant stars. They moved in perfect formation, a display of power meant to terrify any species that saw it. At the front of the fleet, Fleet Commander Kristall stood on the bridge of the flagship Harmony of Spheres. Kristall belonged to a species called the Hegemony, tall beings that looked like humans if humans were made of silver metal and had eyes like blue flames. The commander's ship was beautiful, all smooth lines and glowing panels, designed more like a work of art than a weapon of war. Target the mining colony, Kristall ordered. The voice echoed strangely, like metal bells ringing in harmony. We will give the humans one final chance to surrender before we begin corrective action. The communications officer, a creature that resembled a floating jellyfish made of light, activated the transmission systems. Human colony, this is the Galactic Council Corrective Fleet. You have violated the terms of civilized space. Surrender immediately or face the consequences. The response came quickly from the surface of Titan, one of Saturn's moons where humans had built a large mining operation. The voice was nervous, shaky, exactly what Kristall expected from a defeated enemy. This is Colony Administrator Dong-yun. So, please, we're just miners here. We don't have any weapons. Don't hurt us. We'll do whatever you want. Kristall felt satisfaction flow through the ship's shared consciousness network. The other council species were broadcasting similar feelings of triumph. The humans were already broken, begging for mercy before the battle even began. Excellent, Kristall announced to the fleet. The humans show proper fear. Begin advance formation, disable their ships, and prepare for occupation. As the alien fleet moved forward, long-range sensors detected the human response. Ships were launching from Titan and the nearby space stations, dozens of them fleeing in obvious panic toward the outer system. Look at them run, laughed the captain of a Velkari destroyer. The Velkari looked like giant reptiles with too many arms, and they took great pleasure in others' fear. They scatter like prey animals before the hunt. What the aliens didn't notice was that the fleeing human ships weren't running randomly. They were moving in a specific pattern, taking positions around Titan in what looked like a protective formation, but was actually something very different. On the surface of Titan, Colony Administrator Dong-yun Seo stood in the command center of what the aliens thought was a simple mining operation. Seo was a thin man with tired eyes and hands that were permanently stained from years of working with industrial equipment. Around him, dozens of technicians sat at control panels that monitored systems throughout the solar system. Fleets in position? Seo asked. Captain Ko confirms all ships are ready, his assistant replied. Cooling arrays are charged and waiting for your signal. Seo nodded and activated his communication system. This is Titan base to all units. The aliens are taking the bait. They think we're panicking. He paused and smiled for the first time in weeks. Show them what human panic actually looks like. Activate winter protocol on my mark. Far below Titan's frozen surface, massive machines that the aliens had helped humans build began to hum with power. The council species had been so eager to share their advanced energy technology, so proud to help the primitive humans improve their mining equipment. They never asked what else those power systems might be used for. The alien fleet continued its advance, weapons charging, shields raised, completely confident in their overwhelming advantage. Kristall watched the fleeing human ships and felt something like pity for the weak creatures. Pathetic, the commander said to the bridge crew. How did such a cowardly species ever reach the stars? That was when Captain Hyeman Ko's voice crackled across the communication channels from her ship. The Soul's Revenge. Ko was a small woman with short black hair and the kind of calm voice that never changed whether she was ordering coffee or declaring war. Alien Fleet, this is Captain Ko of the Human Defense Force. You have entered human space without permission and threatened civilian populations. You have 30 seconds to withdraw, or we will respond with appropriate force. The aliens burst into laughter that sounded like breaking glass, howling wind, and other sounds that didn't have human names. A human ship threatening 500 council vessels. It was the funniest thing they'd heard in years. Appropriate force? Crystal managed to say between fits of metallic laughter. Child, we outnumber you 50 to 1. Your mining ships cannot stand against the might of the council. Mining ships? Ko replied, and now there was something like amusement in her voice. Who said anything about mining ships? That was when Dongyun Seo pressed the activation switch. All around Titan, massive, cooling arrays that had been disguised as mining equipment roared to life. Industrial-scale refrigeration systems designed to process the entire atmosphere of a planet began pumping heat out of the surrounding space. Within seconds, the temperature in a sphere 50,000 kilometers across dropped from the comfortable warmth of interplanetary space to minus 100 degrees Celsius. And it kept dropping. The effect on the alien fleet was immediate and devastating. Warning alarms began screaming on every ship, as systems designed for tropical environments suddenly found themselves in temperatures colder than their homeworlds had ever experienced. Energy weapons flickered and died as their power systems froze solid. Shields collapsed as the generators shut down to prevent catastrophic damage. Life support systems struggled to maintain even basic functionality. On the flagship, Crystal felt the shared consciousness network go silent as crew members throughout the fleet began falling into emergency hibernation. The beautiful hegemony, physiology that allowed them to share thoughts and feelings simply couldn't function in the cold. What is happening? The commander managed to whisper before the bridge crew began collapsing one by one. Welcome to winter, Captain Ko's voice replied over the communication system. You wanted to see what humans are capable of? We're the species that survived ice ages. We're the species that conquered the coldest places on our planet and turned them into homes. We're the species that learned to make friends with the thing that kills everything else. As Crystal watched in growing horror, the fleeing human ship suddenly changed course. They weren't running away anymore. They were attacking, and they moved through the freezing space like it was their natural environment. The human ships looked nothing like the elegant alien vessels. They were ugly, blocky things covered in extra armor and strange equipment that the aliens had never understood. Now it became clear what all that equipment was for. The humans had built their ships to fight in conditions that would kill every other known species. Ko's ship, the Soul's Revenge, led the attack like a wolf leading a pack. Its weapon systems glowed with cold blue light as cryocannons fired streams of liquid nitrogen at alien vessels. Where the nitrogen hit, metal became brittle as glass and shattered under the slightest stress. Human boarding parties in powered suits that looked like small spacecraft began attaching to alien ships. The suits were designed to keep humans alive and fighting in the vacuum of space at temperatures that would freeze solid helium. Inside each suit, human soldiers moved with the efficiency of people who had trained for this exact scenario their entire lives. The alien crews couldn't resist. They couldn't even stay awake. One by one, the great warships of the Galactic Council fleet became floating ice sculptures manned by frozen statues. Crystal tried to order a retreat, but the communication systems had frozen along with everything else. The commander's last conscious thought was a desperate message sent through the quantum communication array to the council station. Humans, not what we thought. They are winter itself. Captain Ko's voice echoed through the frozen battlefield as human ships moved between the disabled alien vessels like sharks among sleeping fish. Titan base, this is Ko. Target assessment complete. 437 vessels disabled and captured. 63 destroyed when their power cores overloaded. 0 human casualties. Dongyun Seo's voice crackled back over the radio. Understood, Captain. What's the status of alien survivors? Most are in hibernation. Our medical teams are setting up warming stations to keep them alive until we can figure out what to do with them. Ko paused, looking out at the field of frozen warships. SEO, this is the largest fleet in galactic history. They brought everything they had to destroy us. And now we have everything they had, CO replied. I wonder what the Council will think of that. On her bridge, Captain Ko smiled as she watched human salvage crews begin the long process of boarding and securing 500 alien warships. Each ship represented technology that humanity could study, improve, and adapt for their own use. I think, she said into the radio, the Council is about to learn that humans don't just survive winter, we make everything else freeze with us. The battle for humanity's freedom was over in less than 6 hours. The war for humanity's place in the galaxy was just beginning. Far across space, on the Council station, emergency sessions were being called as news of the fleet's destruction spread. The emergency session on the Galactic Council station was chaos. Representatives from dozens of species filled the chamber, all talking at once in voices that ranged from panicked squeaks to enraged roars. The beautiful curved walls that usually glowed with soft, warm light now flickered with warning signals in colors that hurt to look at. Supreme Arbiter, Veltar stood at the center of it all, the purple crystals that made up its body pulsing with stress patterns that no one had ever seen before. The creature's voice, usually so calm and commanding, cracked like breaking glass when it tried to speak. Order. Order in this chamber, Veltar shouted, but the assembled aliens ignored the plea. They were too busy arguing about whose fault. It was that the greatest fleet in galactic history had been destroyed in a single afternoon. In the middle of all this panic, Dr. Yejino sat quietly at her small desk in the observer section and took careful notes. O was a xenobiologist, supposedly there to study alien cultures for Earth's scientific databases. She was small and unremarkable, the kind of person who seemed to disappear in a crowd. That was exactly what made her so good at her real job. For 3 years, O had been documenting every weakness, every fear, and every biological limitation of every species on the Council. Her reports went straight to Earth's military intelligence, where they were turned into detailed battle plans. The destruction of the Council fleet had been possible because O had spent years learning exactly how each species would react to extreme cold. Now she was about to earn her pay in a very different way. O's personal communication device buzzed with an encrypted message from Earth. Phase 2 authorized. Begin target marking. She smiled and began typing responses to several alien scientists she had befriended over the years. Simple messages asking about their families, their homeworlds, their colonies. Just a concerned human colleague checking on friends during a crisis. What she was actually doing was confirming the locations of the most important civilian targets in Council space. Meanwhile, the argument in the chamber was getting louder and more violent. A creature that looked like a walking pile of rocks was shouting at a floating ball of gas about military incompetence. Several species were demanding immediate nuclear strikes against Earth. Others were calling for economic sanctions or diplomatic isolation. Silence! Veltar finally managed to make its voice heard over the chaos. We must respond to this human aggression with overwhelming force. With what force? Demanded the representative from the hegemony worlds, a silver being whose usually perfect composure was cracked with stress. The humans have our entire fleet. 400 ships just gone. They used some kind of weapon we've never seen before, added a reptilian Velkari delegate. Our ships simply stopped working. Our crews couldn't even stay conscious. A new voice spoke up from the back of the chamber. Perhaps, it said in careful, measured tones, we should consider negotiation. Every alien eye, sensor, and detection organ turned toward the speaker. It was Ambassador Minho Park, who had somehow slipped into the chamber without anyone noticing. He stood calmly in his simple black suit, looking completely unimpressed by the hundreds of deadly aliens staring at him. You, Veltar hissed, and the crystals that made up its body turned from purple to deep red. You knew this would happen. Your casual attitude, your smug responses. You knew your species was planning this attack. Minho adjusted his glasses and checked his watch. Attack? Ambassador, I think there's been some misunderstanding. Your fleet entered human space and threatened our civilians. We defended ourselves. That's not an attack, that's just good sense. The chamber erupted in furious noise again. Aliens were screaming about human treachery, about sneak attacks, about violations of civilized warfare. Through it all, Minho stood perfectly calm, occasionally nodding as if he found their arguments mildly interesting. Finally, he raised one hand, and somehow the gesture was enough to quiet the room. "If I may," he said politely, "I have a message from President Lee." He pulled out a small device and activated it. President Lee's voice filled the chamber, speaking in the same conversational tone she might use to discuss the weather. "To the Galactic Council," the recording said, "your fleet has been neutralized with minimal loss of life. Your crews are being held in comfortable conditions and will be returned to you unharmed once we reach an understanding about humanity's place in galactic affairs." Several aliens started to interrupt, but Minho held up his hand again. "However," the president's voice continued, "we are not satisfied with simply defending our territory. Your council threatened the extinction of the human species. That was a mistake." The temperature in the chamber seemed to drop several degrees. Dr. O discreetly activated a recording device, knowing that Earth's leadership would want to see the aliens' reactions to what came next. "As of this moment," President Lee announced, "Winter Protocol Phase 2 is in effect. We are extending our defensive perimeter to include all space within 50 light-years of Earth. Any military vessels entering this zone will be disabled and captured. Any world supporting military action against humanity will experience climate adjustment until they reconsider their position." The recording paused, and in that silence, every alien in the chamber seemed to realize what the human president had just said. "You're threatening our home worlds," whispered the hegemony representative. "No," Minho replied. "We're promising to defend ourselves against any species that supports aggression against humanity. There's a difference." The recording continued. "To demonstrate our capabilities, we will be conducting climate management operations on 3 worlds that provided ships for your fleet. The effects will be temporary and non-lethal, but we trust they will make our position clear." Veltar's crystals were now pulsing so rapidly, they looked like a strobe light. "This is madness. You cannot hold entire planets hostage." "We're not holding them hostage," Minho said patiently. "We're just showing them what winter feels like. Think of it as a cultural exchange program." At that moment, priority messages began flooding into the chamber from across council space. O watched with professional interest as alien representatives received reports from their home governments. The pattern was always the same: confusion, then disbelief, then growing panic as they realized what was happening. The first target was Velkar Prime, the tropical paradise world that served as the Velkari species capital. Human ships had appeared in orbit just as the planet's 3 suns were setting. Instead of attacking the cities or military bases, they had deployed massive cooling arrays that began sucking heat out of the upper atmosphere. Within hours, the first snowfall in Velkari recorded history began falling on their capital city. The reptilian species, who had never experienced temperatures below 30 degrees Celsius, watched in terror as their world turned white. Government buildings designed for eternal summer began straining under the weight of ice. Transportation systems that relied on solar energy started failing as clouds blocked the sun. "Our people are freezing," the Velkari delegate reported, its voice shaking with shock. "The temperature has dropped 20 degrees in 6 hours. Our medical facilities don't even have equipment to treat cold-related injuries." "Fascinating," Minho replied. "I'm sure they'll adapt. Humans have been dealing with winter for millions of years. I'm confident the Velkari can learn to handle it for a few days." The second target was a hegemony industrial world that produced military equipment. Human ships had surrounded the planet and begun what they called selective climate management. Instead of affecting the whole world, they were creating localized winter zones around weapons factories and military bases. Workers arriving for their shifts found their facilities buried under 3 feet of snow, with temperatures too cold for their equipment to function. The third target was the most dramatic. A gas giant used by the council as a fuel depot suddenly found itself surrounded by human vessels using their industrial cooling systems to begin the process of freezing the planet's atmosphere solid. It would take months to complete, but the message was clear. Humanity could make any world uninhabitable if they chose to. Stop this, the hegemony representative pleaded. Our colonies, our industrial base, everything we've built is perfectly safe as long as you don't threaten us, Minho finished. We're not destroying anything permanently. We're just showing you what happens when you pick a fight with a species that's comfortable in the cold. Veltar tried one more time to maintain control. The Council will not bow to human threats. We have allies, other fleets, weapons you cannot imagine. Minho nodded thoughtfully. You're absolutely right. You do have other allies and other fleets. He paused and smiled that same cold smile he had shown 3 weeks ago. Had, anyway. New reports flooded into the chamber. Human ships were appearing throughout Council space, not attacking but simply positioning themselves near every major world, every military base, every industrial center. The message was simple. We can reach you anywhere, anytime we choose. How? Demanded the rock creature representative. How do you have so many ships? How did you move them into position so quickly? We've been preparing for this conversation for 5 years, Minho replied. Did you really think we'd build cities on 17 worlds just for fun? Minho Park sat in the huge round room and tried not to yawn. The seat was too warm for his taste, and the air smelled like flowers mixed with something that reminded him of rotten eggs. Around him, creatures from dozens of different worlds filled the other seats. Some looked like giant bugs with too many eyes. Others were made of what looked like living crystal. A few seemed to be just floating balls of gas with voices that sounded like wind through broken glass. The room itself was impressive, he had to admit. The walls were made of some kind of metal that changed colors as the light hit it. Far above, a dome showed the stars outside the space station. Minho could see 3 different suns in the distance, each one a different color. But after 5 years as Earth's ambassador to the Galactic Council, he had seen enough pretty alien architecture to last a lifetime. At the center of the room stood the Supreme Arbiter, a being called Veltar. It looked like a person-shaped pile of purple crystals that somehow managed to glow from the inside. When it spoke, its voice came from everywhere at once, like an echo in a cave. The Council calls upon the human representative, Veltar announced. The crystal being's voice made the air vibrate in a way that made Minho's teeth ache. Minho stood up slowly and adjusted his simple black suit. He was a short man with graying hair and calm eyes behind wire-rimmed glasses. Next to all these aliens, he looked very ordinary. That was exactly how he liked it. Ambassador Park of Earth, Veltar continued. You stand before this council to answer for your species' crimes against galactic peace. Minho pulled out a small tablet and pretended to check something on it. Crimes is a strong word, he said in a conversational tone. What exactly are we talking about here? A creature that looked like a walking tree with way too many branches slammed what might have been a hand on its desk. Your species has expanded beyond your home system without proper authorization. Another alien, this one resembling a giant slug with arms, added, You have built weapons of mass destruction. Planet killers. Ah, Minho said, still looking at his tablet. You mean our cities and our defense systems. The crystal being Veltar pulsed brighter. Do not mock this council, human. Your species has shown complete disregard for the established order. You colonize worlds without permission. You build massive industrial complexes. You arm your ships with weapons that could destroy entire planets. Minho finally looked up from his tablet. Could you be more specific about which laws we're supposed to have broken? Because last time I checked, nobody ever gave us a copy of these galactic rules you keep talking about. A wave of angry sounds filled the chamber. Creatures hissed, buzzed, and made noises Minho couldn't even describe. The slug thing was turning a color that probably meant it was furious. The laws of civilized space are known to all, it shouted. Funny thing about that, Minho replied, putting his tablet away. 5 years ago, when your people first made contact with Earth, nobody mentioned any laws. Your ambassador just showed up and said, Hello, we're the Galactic Council, please join us for peaceful cooperation. No rule books, no legal codes, no warnings about what we could or couldn't do. The tree creature waved its branches angrily. Civilized species understand, eh? These things without being told. Well, there's your first mistake, Minho said with a slight smile. Nobody ever accused humans of being civilized. Veltar's crystals turned a darker shade of purple. Your species' behavior has become unacceptable. In the past 5 years, you have established colonies on 17 worlds. You have built what you call cities, but which are clearly military installations capable of supporting millions of soldiers. Actually, those are just cities, Minho interrupted. You know, places where people live and work? Though, I suppose, they could support soldiers if we needed them to. Your ships carry weapons that use nuclear fire, another alien screeched from across the room. Nuclear fusion drives, yes. Very efficient for space travel. The fact that you could weaponize them if you really had to is just a happy coincidence. Minho's smile got a little wider. The Supreme Arbiter raised what might have been arms, calling, "For quiet." The other aliens slowly stopped their angry noises, though many continued to glow, change colors, or vibrate in ways that probably meant they were still furious. The final concern, Veltar announced, is your species' rate of technological advancement. In 5 years, you have gone from barely having spaceflight to building ships that rival our own. This is not natural. Minho shrugged. We're quick learners. Plus, we had some very helpful examples to study. He gestured around the room with a pleasant expression. Several aliens started making angry noises again, but Veltar silenced them with a pulse of bright light. The Council has reached a decision, the crystal being announced. Humanity has 30 standard days to cease all expansion beyond your home system. You will recall all colonies. You will disarm your ships. You will submit to proper guidance from this council. And if we don't? Minho asked, though his tone suggested he already knew the answer. Then the council will take corrective action, Veltar replied. A fleet of 500 ships from 12 member species will ensure your compliance. The chamber fell silent except for the quiet hum of the space station's systems. Every alien eye, crystal, sensor, or whatever they used to see was focused on the human ambassador. Minho looked around the room slowly, meeting as many of those alien gazes as he could. Finally, he spoke. Well, that's certainly an interesting proposal. I'll make sure to pass it along to my government. That is all? The slug creature demanded. No defense of your actions, no plea for mercy? Minho checked his watch, an old-fashioned mechanical one that looked tiny on his wrist. I'm afraid I don't have time for a longer response right now. I have a call scheduled with Earth in 20 minutes, and you know how it is with interstellar communications. Miss your window and you might wait hours for the next one. He started packing his few papers into a briefcase, moving with the casual efficiency of someone who had done this many times before. You show no respect for this council, the tree creature shouted. Minho paused and looked up. For just a moment, his pleasant expression changed to something much colder. Respect is earned, he said quietly, not demanded. The temperature in the room seemed to drop a few degrees. Several aliens shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Then Minho's friendly smile returned, and he finished packing his briefcase. Anyway, thanks for the heads up about the fleet. It's always good to know what's coming. He stood up and gave a small, polite bow to the assembled aliens. Have a lovely day, everyone. As he walked toward the exit, Minho reached into his pocket and pressed a small button on a device no bigger than his thumb. The device had been recording everything, but not for Earth's government. Not exactly, anyway. Behind him, the aliens erupted into chaos. Creatures were shouting, buzzing, hissing, and making sounds that didn't have names in any human language. Some were demanding immediate military action. Others were arguing about whether 30 days was enough time. A few seemed to be questioning whether threatening humanity had been a good idea in the first place. Minho heard all of this as he walked down the corridor toward his small ship. He wasn't hurrying, but he wasn't dawdling either. He had a schedule to keep, and more importantly, he had news to deliver. The funny thing was, he thought as he settled into his pilot seat, the aliens weren't wrong about humans being dangerous. They just had no idea how dangerous or why. They saw human cities and thought military installations. They saw human ships and thought weapons of war. They saw human expansion and thought invasion. What they didn't understand was that for humans, there wasn't really a difference. Every human city was ready to become a fortress. Every human civilian was ready to become a soldier. Every human colony was ready to become a base of operations. Not because humans were naturally warlike, but because they came from a world that had tried to kill them in every possible way for millions of years. The aliens were about to learn what happened when you threatened a species that had survived ice ages, plagues, volcanoes, asteroids, and each other. As his ship pulled away from the station, Minho activated his communication system and sent a coded message toward Earth. It was very short. They took the bait. Winter protocol is authorized. Then he settled back in his chair and started planning his route home. He wanted to be well clear of the area when the Council's corrective fleet arrived, not because he was afraid of it, but because he didn't want to miss the show when it met humanity's response. The aliens thought they knew what monsters looked like. They were about to find out how wrong they were. 6 months later, the chamber that had once housed the Galactic Council looked very different. The warm, tropical atmosphere that the aliens preferred had been replaced with something more comfortable for mixed species meetings. The temperature was set at exactly 18 degrees Celsius, which humans found pleasant and most aliens could tolerate with proper clothing. Ambassador Minho Park sat in the same chair where he had received humanity's ultimatum half a year ago. But now the nameplate in front of him read Human Representative Galactic Cooperative Council. The word council remained, but everything else had changed. Around the chamber, alien representatives sat in thick coats, thermal suits, and other cold weather gear that would have been unthinkable 6 months ago. The Velkari delegate wore what looked like a furry sleeping bag with eye holes. The hegemony representative's beautiful silver skin was hidden under layers of insulation that made it look like a metallic snowman. At the center of the room, Supreme Arbiter Veltar still occupied the position of authority, but the purple crystal, being now pulsed with what humans had learned were patterns of resigned acceptance rather than confidence. Its voice, when it spoke, carried none of the commanding presence it once had. The cooperative recognizes Professor Minjae Shin of Earth for his presentation on adaptive climate management in multi-species communities, Veltar announced. Professor Shin stood up at the human delegation table. He was a tall man with kind eyes and the patient manner of someone who had spent his career explaining complicated things to people who didn't want to understand them. In his hands, he carried a tablet that contained the most important lesson the galaxy had learned in the past 6 months. "Thank you, Arbiter," Shin said politely. "Today I want to talk about what we humans call learning to love winter." A ripple of what might have been nervous laughter went through the alien delegates. In the past half year, winter had become the most feared word in galactic politics. 6 months ago, Shin continued, the former Galactic Council made a simple mistake. You assumed that because humanity was new to galactic civilization, we were weak. You saw our rapid expansion and thought it meant we were desperate. You saw our defensive preparations and thought they meant we were afraid. He activated a holographic display showing the current state of galactic politics. Human territory now extended far beyond the original 17 colonies, marked in blue. Surrounding human space was a buffer zone marked in gray, where former Council species now operated under human climate management agreements. What you didn't understand, Shin explained, is that humans don't expand because we're desperate. We expand because we're comfortable. We don't build defenses because we're afraid. We build them because we've learned that the universe is usually trying to kill you and it's better to be ready. The Velkari delegate raised what might have been a hand. Professor, with respect, your species nearly froze our entire home world. How is that? Learning to love winter. Shin nodded sympathetically. An excellent question. Let me show you what Velkar Prime looks like today. The display changed to show the Velkari home world. Instead of the tropical paradise it had once been, large sections of the planet were now covered in what humans called temperate zones. Areas that had never seen temperatures below 40 degrees now experienced seasonal changes, with actual winters that brought snow and frost. At first, Shin admitted, The Velkari people struggled with these new conditions. But something interesting happened. Your agricultural scientists discovered that many food crops actually grow better with seasonal temperature changes. Your medical researchers found that controlled exposure to cold temperatures improved immune system function. Your engineers learned to build structures that could withstand both heat and cold, making them stronger and more durable. The Velkari delegate was quiet for a moment. Our people adapted. More than adapted, Shin said with genuine enthusiasm. They flourished. Velkar Prime now produces 20% more food than it did before the climate adjustment. Your people live longer, healthier lives. Your technology has advanced more in 6 months than it did in the previous decade. He changed the display again, showing similar scenes from other worlds that had experienced human climate management. Industrial planets where workers now operated in controlled cold environments and achieved better results. Military bases, where soldiers trained in winter conditions and became more effective fighters. Research stations where scientists made breakthrough discoveries while studying the effects of temperature variation on their experiments. The pattern is consistent across all species, Shin explained. Controlled exposure to challenging environments makes you stronger, smarter, and more capable. Humans learned this lesson millions of years ago, when our planet kept trying to freeze us to death. Instead of just surviving it, we learned to use it as a tool for improvement. A new voice spoke up from the back of the chamber. It was Admiral Sang-Hoon Lee, the human fleet commander who had led the occupation of the council station 6 months ago. Lee was a stocky man with gray hair and scars on his hands from years of shipyard work before he joined the military. If I may add something, Professor, Lee said. The most important thing we've learned is that winter isn't punishment, it's partnership. When humans make space cold, we're not trying to hurt anyone. We're trying to share the advantages that come from learning to be comfortable in difficult conditions. He gestured toward the alien delegates in their winter clothing. Look around this chamber. 6 months ago, none of you could have survived in these temperatures. Now you're all here, functioning normally, conducting business. You've adapted. You've become stronger. The hegemony representative spoke up, its voice muffled by the insulation surrounding its head. Admiral, our people still struggle with the cold. Many of our worlds remain under human climate management. When will you return our environments to normal? Admiral Lee exchanged a glance with Professor Shin. That's the thing, he said gently. This is normal now. Not just for your worlds, but for the galaxy. Humanity isn't going to stop expanding, and we're not going to stop bringing winter with us. The question is whether you want to fight it or learn to use it. Minho Park stood up and activated another display, this one showing trade statistics. Consider the economic benefits, he said. Species that have adopted human climate technology are seeing unprecedented growth in manufacturing, agriculture, and research. The cold weather modifications we've shared have opened up entire categories of worlds that were previously uninhabitable. The display showed dozens of planets that had once been considered too cold for alien settlement, but were now thriving colonies using human environmental technology. We're not conquering the galaxy, Park continued. We're teaching it how to be comfortable in a wider range of conditions. Every species that learns to work with winter instead of against it becomes more capable, more resilient, and more successful. Supreme Arbiter, Veltar's crystals pulsed in what humans had learned, was a pattern of reluctant acceptance. What you describe sounds like forced evolution. You are changing entire species without their consent. Professor Shin nodded seriously. That's a fair concern, Arbiter. But consider the alternative. 6 months ago, the galaxy was divided into warm world species and the occasional cold-adapted outlier. Trade was limited, colonization was restricted, and entire regions of space were effectively uninhabitable. He gestured to the mixed species chamber around them. Today we have species from 40 different thermal ranges working together in the same environment. We have colonies on worlds that span temperature ranges from tropical to Arctic. We have technology sharing between species that never could have collaborated before. And most importantly, Admiral Lee added, we have peace. Real peace, not just the absence of war. When everyone can survive in the same conditions, when everyone benefits from the same environmental advantages, there's no reason to fight over habitable worlds anymore. A small alien that looked like a walking mushroom raised what might have been a hand. What about species that cannot adapt? What about those whose biology is simply incompatible with cold temperatures? Dr. Yejin Oh stepped forward from her position in the Scientific Observer section. In the past 6 months, she had transitioned from spy to humanity's chief xenobiology advisor, helping design life support systems for species struggling with temperature adaptation. That's why we developed the partnership program, she explained. Species that cannot biologically adapt to cold environments can still benefit from the economic and technological advantages. We provide climate-controlled habitats, advanced life support systems, and specialized equipment that allows them to work alongside cold-adapted species. She activated a display showing several cooperative projects where warm-weather species worked in climate-controlled environments, while cold-adapted species handled external operations. The key insight, O continued, is that different thermal adaptations are advantages, not limitations. Warm-weather species often have biological capabilities that cold-adapted species lack. By working together, everyone becomes more capable than they were alone. The chamber fell quiet as the assembled aliens considered what they had heard. Finally, the Velkari delegate spoke up.